I once thought my life would be a straight line. Not too high, but not too low either. A small house, a husband who loved me, and a child to cherish. That would be enough. But life is never as simple as the stitches I use to sew on dresses. My name is Lon. I'm 30 years old, and now, sitting in a dim rented room with little my sleeping beside me, I've come to understand that happiness is like a breeze. It comes gently, then leaves without warning. Back then, I met Hung at a village market. I was selling a few handmade shirts, and he stopped by, smiling warmly. "You sew beautifully. I'll buy one for my mother." He wasn't handsome, but his eyes were bright, and his warm voice made me feel at ease. We got to know each other, then fell in love, not with the romance of movies, but with quiet evenings sitting together, eating bowls of mung bean dessert I made. He said, "Lon, I'm not rich, but I'll take care of you for life." I believed him because back then, I didn't need anything more than a sincere promise. We got married on a drizzly afternoon. I wore a white dye my mother had sewn, and he wore an old but neatly ironed shirt. There was no grand feast, no wedding flowers, just a few relatives and a simple meal. I put on the wedding ring he bought, a tiny silver band, but to me, it was the whole world. That night, he held my hand and whispered, "We'll have a family, Lon." I nodded, tears falling from happiness. I dreamed of a small tailoring shop where I'd sit at a sewing machine. He'd help me sell, and later, our child would run around us. Mai came to us after a year. When the doctor placed her in my arms, I cried until I couldn't breathe. She was so tiny, with rosy skin and round eyes like lychee seeds. Hung stood beside me, holding my hand, smiling. "She looks like you. So beautiful." I looked at her, then at him, thinking that even if life was poor, I was the richest person in the world. I named her Mai, hoping her life would be as fragrant as the flower, not bitter like the hardships I'd tasted. In the early days, we lived in a tiny rented room on the outskirts. I worked as a seamstress at a nearby workshop, cycling 2 kilometers each day, then rushing home to cook and care for Mai. Hung worked as a construction worker, rain or shine, bringing home his wages and saying, "Save it. We'll open a shop for you one day." I tucked every coin into an old tin box, counting it each night, dreaming of the day I'd stand in my own tailoring shop. Mai grew up to the hum of my sewing machine and Hung's bedtime fairy tales. She loved crawling around my feet, playing with fabric scraps, giggling when I pretended to scold her. I'd hug her and whisper, "Mommy will give you a beautiful childhood, Mai." But then things began to change, slowly, like a small tear in a shirt that I didn't notice until it ripped wide open. Hung started coming home late, the smell of alcohol lingering on his clothes. When I asked, he snapped, "I'm a man working hard. What's wrong with a few drinks?" I stayed quiet, not wanting to argue in front of Mai. But those drinking sessions grew more frequent, and the money he gave me dwindled. One day, I opened the tin box and found it empty. I asked him, and he shouted, "I borrowed it. I'll pay it back." I cried but didn't dare say more, only holding my close, telling myself, "It'll be okay." The sewing workshop started struggling too. Orders dropped, wages were delayed, and some months I only earned a few $100,000. I took on extra hours, cycling home in the dark, legs aching, but still smiling when I ran to hug my legs. "Mommy's home." Hung saw me struggling and sometimes said, "Quit. Let me handle it." But how could he handle it when his wages barely cover Mai's milk? I gritted my teeth and kept working because I didn't want Mai to go hungry. Then one day, Hung came home with a wild idea. He said, "Lon, my friend told me about a big investment opportunity, double the profit." I looked at him, skeptical, "But we don't have money to invest." He laughed, patting my shoulder. "I've borrowed some. Don't worry. In a few months, we'll turn our lives around." I shook my head, pleading, "Please don't. We're poor but stable. Don't risk it." But he wouldn't listen. He borrowed a huge sum, more than I dared to imagine, and poured it into his so-called big deal. I sat at home, my heart burning with fear, praying each night that he was right. But heaven didn't hear me. A month later, he came home, face pale, hands trembling. "It's gone, Lon," he said, voice hoarse. "My friend cheated me. The money's lost." I stood frozen, unable to cry, staring at him like a stranger. The borrowed money, our savings, my dream of a tailoring shop, all vanished. Creditors started showing up, banging on the door, cursing loudly. I hid in a corner with Mai, covering her ears so she wouldn't hear their venomous words. Hung sat silently, head bowed, saying nothing. That night, we had a huge fight. I screamed, "What were you thinking? How will I live now?" He slammed the table, yelling back, "You think I wanted this? I wanted a better life for you and her." I cried, tears falling onto Mai's sleeping form in my arms. A better life when we're left with nothing? I asked, but he didn't answer. He stood up and walked out, leaving me with the sound of rain and a pain I couldn't put into words. The next morning, I woke up to a note on the table. "I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore." Hung was gone. No goodbye, no final glance. I held the note, hands shaking, tears dripping onto the smudge sorry. I wanted to scream, to chase after him, but then I looked at Mai, sleeping peacefully, her tiny lips smiling as if unaware of everything. I knelt beside her, hugging her tightly, sobbing, "It's just you and me now, Mai." The workshop closed the following week. I lost my job, the rent debts piled up, and the landlord threatened to evict us if I didn't pay. I sat in the dim room, the yellow light flickering as if it might die. Mai hugged her old doll, whispering, "Mommy, I'm hungry." I looked at her, my heart breaking, but I knew I couldn't give up. I wiped my tears, stood up, and whispered to myself, "Even with nothing but my hands, I'll live for Mai." I don't remember how long I cried after Hung left. Maybe all night, maybe for days until my tears ran dry, and I was just an empty shell sitting in that dark rented room. Mai was the only thing pulling me out of that darkness. She didn't understand what was happening, only hugging my legs, her voice clear, "Mommy, where's Daddy?" I looked in her round eyes, my heart aching like it was being cut, but I smiled, stroking her hair. "Daddy's working far away. It's just you and me now." I lied because I didn't want Mai to know her father had abandoned us like an old, torn shirt. The day the workshop closed, I stood at its gate, holding a cloth bag with my sewing tools, watching others cry and curse. I didn't cry or curse. I just turned and walked away, my feet heavy as lead. The rent was 2 months overdue, and the landlord knocked daily, her voice sharp as a blade. "Pay up or get out. I don't keep freeloaders." I begged on my knees, but she only shook her head. "I have to live too." I sat in the room, watching Mai play with her old doll, asking myself, how can I survive now? One afternoon, wandering the market to pick up plastic bottles for a few thousand dong, I overheard vegetable vendors whispering, "The big supermarket up the street is hiring temps, but it's tough. No pay the first month, and they only pick one person." I froze, my heart pounding. A supermarket where I'd pass by, seeing people in clean uniforms pushing carts full of goods. I had no degree, no skills beyond sewing, but I thought, if I don't try, what will I eat? I went home, dug through the closet for my least worn shirt, the one Hung bought me when we were newlyweds. Standing before a cracked mirror, I practiced smiling, though my red eyes couldn't hide the pain. I told myself, "You have to do this, Lon, for Mai." That night, I took Mai to the supermarket. She held my hand, her little steps pattering along, asking, "Mommy, where are we going?" I bent down, kissed her forehead. "Mommy's going to work, to earn money for your snacks." She smiled, her eyes lighting up, and my heart warmed, if only a little. When we arrived, a staff member greeted me coldly. "Sign up over there, but fair warning, it's not easy." I nodded, my hands trembling as I wrote my name on the form. They told me to work night shifts, a 1-month trial, and only one person would be chosen out of 20. I looked around at the others. Younger, faster, some with diplomas. I wondered, can I do this? But then I saw Mai, sitting on the steps, humming softly while hugging her doll, and I knew I had no right to give up. The first shift started at 9 p.m. I couldn't afford a bus, so I ran 5 kilometers, carrying Mai on my back. Ms. Han looked at me, her eyes cold. "This is your last warning. One more mistake, and you're done." I nodded, tears soaking the floor, but I didn't dare wipe them. I went back to work, hands shaking with the scanner, praying, "Give me one chance, just one." I glanced at Mai in the storage corner, seeing her cough violently, and I wanted to run to her and hold her. But I couldn't. I had to work to prove I was worthy. The shift ended at midnight. Ms. Han called us to line up, her voice stern. Today's the last day. We'll choose the permanent hire. If your name is called, go to the office. If not, leave. I stood there, hands shaking so much I couldn't hold the water bottle the guard gave me. I tugged my shirt, her voice clear. Will you be chosen, Mommy? I stroked her head, my throat tight. I don't know, but I've tried my best. I looked at the others, whispering and laughing, while I stood still, my heart pounding like it would burst. Ms. Han began calling names. One person went in, then came out, head down. The second, the third, the same. Each time the door opened, my heart clenched. Each time someone left disappointed, I hoped, if only a little. But then Tao was called, and I saw her walk in, my heart sinking. I thought, it's over. I held my tears welling up, whispering, I'm sorry, I couldn't do it. She hugged me, her voice faint. Don't cry, I love you. I sobbed, holding her tighter, thinking all those rainy nights, those hungry days, were for nothing. But then Ms. Han called, Nguyen Thi Lan. I froze, unable to believe my ears. I tugged my shirt. Mommy, they called you. I looked at her, then at Ms. Han, my legs barely able to move. I led my with me, stepping into the office, my heart pounding like it would burst. Inside, Ms. Han sat with two others, their eyes on me, not cold but not warm either. She said, sit down. I sat, hands trembling, my standing beside me, holding my hand tightly. Ms. Han looked at me, her voice slow. You're not fast, not skilled, but you didn't give up. I saw you bring your daughter every night. I didn't like it, but I know you had no choice. I bowed my head, tears falling. Yes, I just want my daughter to live. She paused, then said, you start officially tomorrow. I looked up, unable to believe my ears. Tears poured out, hot and unstoppable, streaming down my cheeks. Not from joy, but from all the nights I held mine to rain, the days I starved so she could eat, the times I thought I died inside. I pressed my lips together, nodded, not crying aloud, but in my head I screamed, I did it, Mai. Ms. Han stood, saying, go home, come back tomorrow. I led Mai out, my legs still shaking, my heart still unbelieving. I held her close, sobbing, Mommy did it, my girl. Mai hugged me, her voice weak but joyful. You're the best, Mommy. I looked at her, seeing her smile, and I knew every hardship was worth it. I took her out of the supermarket, the rain still falling, but I didn't feel cold anymore. The streetlights glowed brightly, like a promise that tomorrow would be different. That night, I held Mai as we slept under the overpass, but my heart wasn't heavy anymore. I stroked her hair, whispering, starting tomorrow, I'll give you a warm place to sleep. She slept in my arms, and I looked at the sky, tears falling, but this time they were tears of hope. I knew I wasn't rich, wasn't free of hardship, but I'd passed through the darkness. And I told myself, thank you, Lon, for not giving up. The night I was chosen, I held my under the overpass, but for the first time in ages, I didn't cry. The cars roared overhead, the wind blew coldly, but I no longer felt alone. I stroked her hair, whispering, starting tomorrow, I'll give you a warm place to sleep. Mai slept in my arms, her tiny lips smiling. I looked at the sky, tears falling, but this time they were tears of hope. I didn't become rich overnight, didn't escape hardship instantly, but I knew I'd overcome the darkness. And I told myself, thank you, Lon, for not giving up. The first day as a permanent employee, I walked into the supermarket with trembling legs, but my heart was lighter. Ms. Han gave me a new uniform, her voice still stern. Do well, don't make me regret this. I nodded, clutching the blue outfit, tears welling up. I put it on, standing before the cracked mirror in the storage room, seeing a stranger, not the ragged, wandering mother, but an employee, someone with a job, a future. I took Mai to the storage corner, setting her on the familiar cardboard, but I promised her, just a few more days, I'll find a better place for you. She smiled, hugging her old doll. You look so pretty in that shirt, Mommy. My first paycheck came after 2 weeks. I held the envelope, hands trembling as I counted each note. Not much, but enough to rent a small, clean room with a real bed for Mai. The day we moved in, I led her inside, where there was only an old bed and a small table, but she squealed, "Mommy, our house is so beautiful." I held her, tears falling. "Yes, it's our house, my girl." That night, I lay beside her, listening to her steady breathing, and I slept deeply, free of nightmares, free of fear. I worked hard at the supermarket. I learned to use the computer, though each mistake made me sweat. Ms. Han sometimes stopped to guide me. "Press this key. Don't be too slow." I nodded, trying harder, though my hands were clumsy and my head ached from sleepless years. Tao was still there, still looking at me with disdain, but I didn't care anymore. I had a job, and I didn't need to prove anything to anyone but myself. I began to get healthier. I bought her milk, a new pair of sandals to replace the torn ones. She skipped around, singing, and each time I saw her smile, my heart warmed. I walked her down brightly lit streets each evening after my shift, holding a box of hot food bought with my wages. She asked, "Mommy, are we rich yet?" I laughed, ruffling her hair. "Not yet, but I'll give you a better life." She nodded, hugging my arm, and I knew I was keeping my promise to her. In the months that followed, I saved every dong. I skipped lunch, drinking only water to save for Mai's books. She grew up, starting kindergarten, and I stood outside the school gate watching her run with friends, my heart swelling with pride. One day, she came home with a scribbled drawing. "Mommy, I drew you. You're a superhero." I held her, laughing and crying. "I'm not a superhero. I'm just your mommy." But inside, I knew I'd done what I once thought impossible. A year passed and I got a raise. Ms. Han called me into her office, her voice still cold but with a hint of warmth. "You've done well. You'll oversee the storage team now." I nodded, tears falling. "Thank you, I won't let you down." I used the money to buy an old sewing machine, taking on extra sewing work during the day. I sat at it, the familiar hum ringing out, and I remembered my old dream, a small tailoring shop. I told myself, not yet, but one day I'll make it. I grew up with the sound of the sewing machine and the stories I told each night. She stopped asking about her father, but once she looked at me, her voice soft. "Mommy, are you tired?" I stroked her hair, smiling. "Yes, but I'm happy because I have you." She hugged me, whispering, "I'll study hard so you won't be tired anymore." I cried, holding her tighter, thinking all those rainy nights, those hungry days, were worth this moment. Years later, I opened a small grocery stall. It wasn't big, wasn't fancy, but it was mine, built with my calloused hands. I stood behind the counter, selling goods, watching my run around, and I remembered the days I thought I wouldn't survive. I hired a helper, a single mother like I once was, because I wanted to give someone the chance Ms. Han gave me. The stall didn't make me rich, but it gave me a peaceful life, one where I no longer feared tomorrow. I got into university on her own merit. The day she received her acceptance letter, I stood beside her, watching her smile radiantly, tears falling endlessly. She hugged me. "Mommy, I did it." I nodded, choking up. "Yes, you did, and so did I." I watched her walk through the university gates, her small but strong shoulders, and I knew I'd given her a childhood not too bitter, as I promised. One evening, I sat in my small house, looking at a photo of Mai from her graduation. I remembered the days I held her in the rain, the nights I cried under the overpass, the times I thought I wouldn't make it. I held the old wedding ring, found among the belongings thrown out when we were evicted, and smiled. It was no longer a memory of Hong, but of my journey, of the days I rose from ashes. I stepped outside, looking at the glowing streetlights. Mai ran up, hugging me. "Mommy, let's go home." I nodded, holding her hand, my heart lighter than ever. Dong bought books for Mai, a new blanket so she wouldn't be cold. She grew up, learning to read and write, and one day she scribbled "Mommy" and gave it to me. "Mommy, I wrote this for you." I held her, crying, "You're so great. I love you." I hung the paper on the wall, looking at it daily, knowing I was building a future, not just for me, but for her. But life kept testing me. One day, the landlord knocked again. "Rent's going up again, pay or leave." I stood frozen, hands trembling, I'll try. She walked away, and I held my heart heavy. I worked overtime, sewed until dawn, but the money still wasn't enough. I looked at her sleeping, telling myself, I have to find a way. Tuan came by, saw me exhausted, and said, Lon, I have an old cart. Want to sell street food with me? Earn a bit more. I hesitated, but looking at I nodded. Thank you, I'll try. I started selling his steamed buns, standing by the cart each afternoon after the supermarket. I stood in the sun, in the rain, calling out to customers, and each dong I earned, I held tightly, thinking of Those days, I saw my change. She stopped crying when teased, instead laughing, playing with friends, and telling me, Mommy, I have a new friend. They don't tease me anymore. I held her, tears falling. You're so great. I'm proud of you. I watched her grow, her small steps steady, and I knew I wasn't just rebuilding my life, but hers too. Standing by the steamed bun cart with Tuan, I imagine you under the scorching sun or pouring rain, your voice hoarse from calling out to customers, but your eyes still lighting up as you counted each small coin tucked into your pocket. You weren't just selling buns. You were selling hope, the dream that one day I wouldn't have to worry about hunger or cold. I see you gritting your teeth through the curious stares of passers-by, the whispers of other vendors. A single mother, of course, she's struggling. But you didn't care or pretended not to hear because you knew each bun sold was a small brick building Mai's future. Mai grew up in those days, not in material abundance, but in the love and resilience you passed to her. I picture her standing by the cart, tiny but quick, helping you wrap buns, handing water to customers, her smile wide. Mommy, I sold 2 already. You looked at her, smiling, though your hands ached from kneading dough, your back sore from supermarket shifts. You said nothing, just ruffled her hair, but inside, it must have been a mix of joy and pain. Joy for her strength, pain that she had to grow up faster than other kids. Time passed, and you didn't stop at the bun cart. I see you sitting by the old sewing machine, the dim yellow light casting shadows on your face lined with crow's feet, your hands deftly stitching. The sewing work grew, not just from Tuan or Lin, but from strangers who heard of your skill and diligence. You no longer raced to pay rent, starting to save, not much, but enough to dream again of a tailoring shop, like the one you envisioned with Hung, though now it was a distant memory. One afternoon, when Mai came home from school, she ran into the rented room, holding a paper. Mommy, I got the highest score in class. You stopped sewing, looked up, your tired eyes suddenly bright. You held her, laughing loudly. You're so great, Mai. She chattered excitedly. My teacher praised me. My friends don't tease me anymore. They play with me. You listened, tears falling, but not from pain, pride. You stroked her hair, whispering, You're my greatest joy. That night, you sewed, but your heart was lighter, as if each stitch was a promise to Mai, a promise of a better life. In the months after, you and Tuan grew closer. He wasn't just someone bringing work. He listened when you were weary. One day, by the cart, watching Mai play nearby, he said softly, Lon, have you ever thought about letting someone help you? You hesitated, shaking your head. I'm used to doing it myself, Tuan. He smiled kindly. I know, but you don't have to be alone forever. You looked at him, your heart stirring, but you stayed silent. You were afraid to open up again, afraid of another wound like Hung's betrayal. But Tuan's warm, sincere eyes made you think maybe not everyone would leave. I started elementary school. You bought her a new backpack, though it meant skipping meals for days. On her first day, you stood outside the school gate, watching her walk in with shining eyes, your throat tight. You remember the days she curled up under the overpass, the nights she was hungry but still smiled. Mommy's so great. Now, she was growing, holding a pencil, writing crooked words. I love Mommy. You hung each paper she wrote on the wall, looking at them nightly, telling yourself, you did it, Lon. The supermarket job stayed steady, though Tao kept making trouble. But you weren't afraid anymore. You did your part well, and Ms. Han trusted you more. One day, she called you in, her voice stern but warmer. You've done well. I'm putting you in charge of small storage team, with a slight raise. You bowed, tears falling. Thank you, I'll keep trying. That night, you came home, Hell my, told her, and she squealed, Mommy's a real superhero. You laughed, holding her tighter, thinking maybe you weren't a superhero, but you were the mother I needed. With a raise and sewing money, you saved a small sum. You didn't dare dream big, but you wanted me to have a fuller childhood. You took her to the park on weekends, this time not just sitting on a bench, but buying tickets for the merry-go-round. She laughed loudly, waving from above. Mommy, it's so fun. You stood below, watching, tears falling from happiness. You thought of the days you thought you wouldn't survive, and now you were giving her moments you never had. One evening, Tuan came by with a bag of fruit. From I, don't refuse. You smiled, took it, and invited him to sit. You talked, not about buns or clothes, but simple things, rain, sun, tiring but worthwhile days. He looked at you, his voice soft. Lon, if you're okay with it, I want to be with you. Not for you to lean on, but to walk with you. You froze, hands trembling on your cup, your heart a mess. You remembered Hung, his broken promise of a lifetime, but you also saw Tuan, who promised nothing grand, just stood by you through the hardest days. You didn't answer right away, only saying, I need time, Tuan. He nodded, smiling kindly. I can wait. In the years after, you kept working, sewing, standing by the cart when free. But you weren't alone anymore. Tuan didn't push you, just helped quietly, fixing the sewing machine, taking me to school when you were busy. You looked at him, am I growing in love not just from you, but from a man willing to be her support. One day, you called him over, your voice soft. Tuan, if you don't mind, I want to walk with you. He smiled, held your hand, saying little, but his eyes said everything. I entered middle school, then high school, each step a pride you never dared dream of. She excelled, no longer teased but leading her class. You and Tuan opened a small grocery stall, not big, not fancy, but yours when I ran around after school. You stood behind the counter, watching her grow, Tuan smiling kindly beside you, and you knew happiness wasn't a fleeting breeze anymore. It was something you held with your own hands. The day I got her university acceptance, you stood beside her, tears falling endlessly. She hugged you, Mommy, I did it. You nodded, choking up. Yes, you did, and so did I. Tuan stood there, patting your shoulder, his voice low. Lon, we did it. You looked at him, and smiled, a smile of someone who'd walked through darkness, rebuilt life from shards, and now had a real family. I see you, Lon, through each word, a woman who didn't just survive, but lived beautifully. You're not rich, not famous, but you have my, Tuan, a simple but meaningful life. You hold the old wedding ring, no longer a painful memory, but proof of your journey. A mother, a woman who never gave up. And I believe, somewhere in the sky, there's a star shining just for you, Lon. The days after my university acceptance, I lived like in a dream I didn't dare believe was real. I stood beside her, hands trembling as I stroked her long hair, looking into her radiant eyes, eyes once red under the overpass, dimmed by hunger, now sparkling with joy and hope. She hugged me, her voice choked. Mommy, I did it. I nodded, tears falling endlessly. Yes, you did, and so did I. Tuan stood there, quietly patting my shoulder, his kind smile like morning sunlight. Lon, we did it. I turned to him, then to my heart swelling with a feeling I couldn't name. Not complete happiness, because my life still bore scars, but peace, what I'd sought all these years. The day I started university, Tuan, and I took her there. Resting my head on his shoulder, I think my life wasn't straight, but it's beautiful because of you and my. I looked up at the sky, whispering, thank you, Lon, for not giving up. Thank you, Mai, for being my light. Thank you, Tuan, for being my home. And I knew, no matter what tomorrow brought, I'd lived a life worth living. Not for wealth, but for the love I'd given and received from shards I thought could never be mended. The days after Mai's wedding, our little house felt strangely quiet. No more of Mai's chatter about school, no more evenings with her sitting beside me, playing with fabric scraps while I sewed. The grocery stall stayed open, the sound of customers coming and going steady, but I felt an emptiness, not sadness, but the sensation of a mother who'd let her bird fly free. Tuan noticed. One day, He sat with me under the yellow lamplight, his voice low. "Lon, do you miss my?" I nodded, smiling faintly. "Yes, but I'm happy. She's found her own path." He took my hand, saying nothing more, just sitting there, and I knew he understood me better than I understood myself. I still visited regularly, often on weekends, sometimes with her husband, Min. He was gentle, quiet, but always brought little gifts from his hometown. Sometimes vegetables his mother grew, sometimes dried fish he made himself. I liked Min not for the gifts, but for how he looked at Mai, with tender, steady eyes like Tuan once looked at me. One day, Mai sat with me in the kitchen, peeling peanuts to help me cook soup, her voice soft. "Mom, Min says he wants kids, but I'm not ready. I want to teach the little ones a few more years." I looked up at her, seeing her sparkling yet troubled eyes. I placed my hand on hers, saying, "Do what you want, don't rush. I can wait, as long as you're happy." Mai smiled, hugging me. "You always understand me, Mom." But life didn't let me rest in those peaceful days forever. One morning, as I swept the yard, a woman approached, petite, hair neatly tied, wearing a simple audai. She looked at me, her voice hesitant. "Are you Lon, Mai's mother?" I nodded, a strange feeling rising in my chest. She bowed her head, continuing, "I'm Hung. I lived with Hung a few years ago." I stood frozen, the broom slipping from my hands. Hung, the name I thought I'd buried in the past, now blowing back like a cold wind. I took a deep breath, asking, "Why are you here?" Hung looked up, eyes red. "Hung's gone, sister." I didn't know who else to tell, so I came to you. I sat down, my mind spinning. Hung spoke, her voice breaking. After leaving me and Mai, Hung wandered everywhere, taking odd jobs, until he met her at a roadside eatery. They lived together without marriage, without children, until Hung fell ill, liver cancer, the result of years of drinking. Before he died, he told Hung about me and Mai, saying he regretted everything, wanting to see his daughter once, but never daring to. Hung handed me a small box containing a few old items. A frayed shirt I'd once sewn for Hung, a blurry photo of me and Mai when she was little, and a handwritten note. "Lon, I was wrong. Forgive me if you can." I held the note, hands trembling, tears falling uncontrollably. Tuan came back from the market, saw me sitting dazed, and asked, "Lon, what's wrong?" I told him everything, each word cutting into my heart. He listened silently, then hugged me, his voice steady. "Whatever you want to do, I'm with you." I looked at him at the box and decided, I'll show Mai, let her choose. That evening, I called Mai over, placed the box before her, and recounted it all. Mai sat quietly, looking at the photo, then the note, not crying, just sighing, "Mom, I'm not angry, but I'm not sad anymore. To me, Dad is Uncle Tuan." I hugged her, tears falling, and Tuan stood there, eyes red but smiling. I knew our family didn't need Hung to be whole. After that, Tuan and I slowed down. I stopped sewing late into the night, stopped manning the stall all day. We hired a young man to help, and I spent time tending flowers, nurturing the pots in front of the house. I loved sitting on the porch, watching the blooms, hearing birds chirp, thinking of the days I thought I wouldn't survive. Tuan still made steamed buns, but not on the streets anymore. He baked at home for regular customers. One day, he sat with me, holding a teacup, his voice gentle. "Lon, how do you see our life?" I smiled, leaning on his shoulder. "Not rich, not grand, but enough because I have you." Mai and Min finally had a child, a tiny girl named Nak, because Mai said she was the family's precious gem. The day Nak was born, Tuan and I went to the hospital. Watching Mai hold her, my heart overwhelmed. The baby looked like Mai as a child, round eyes, rosy skin, and when I held Nak, I cried, "I'm old now, and I have a granddaughter." Mai laughed, grasping my hand. "You're not old, Mom, you're a superhero." Tuan stood beside us, stroking Nak's hair, his voice low. "I'm old too, but I'm happy." We laughed, and I saw my life as a circle, from the day I held Mai to now, watching Mai hold Nak with me still here, witnessing it all. Nak grew up surrounded by our love. Mai kept teaching, kept her free classes, but now Min helped, while Tuan and I took turns watching Nak. I sewed tiny clothes for her, sitting by the old machine, its familiar hum like an old song. Some days, Knock crawled around my feet, playing with fabric scraps, giggling brightly, and I saw myself in her. Not the suffering, but the simple joy I'd once dreamed for my. Tuan sat nearby, telling Knock fairy tales, his voice hoarser with age, but his eyes still bright as when he met me. One afternoon, when Knock was nearly 3, I brought her to visit. Knock ran in, hugging my legs. "Grandma, I missed you." I lifted her, kissed her cheek, my heart warm. My sat beside me, looking at me, her voice soft. "Mom, I want to open a small center teaching skills to poor kids, not just reading, but how to live. What do you think?" I looked up, smiling. "Yes, do it. Tuan and I will help." Tuan nodded, saying, "I can't teach, but I'll make buns for the kids." My laughed loudly, hugging us both. "I have the best family." My center opened a year later, small but warm. Tuan and I chipped in some savings. My and Min handled the rest. I stood watching her teach the kids to fold paper, plant trees, and I saw my dream. The little tailoring shop I'd once imagined, now growing into something bigger through Mai's hands. One day, a girl from the class ran to me, hugging me. "Grandma, teacher Mai said you're amazing. Tell me your story." I smiled, sat down, and told her about carrying Mai in the rain, the nights I cried but didn't give up. Her eyes widened, and she said, "You're a real superhero." I hugged her, tears falling, thinking maybe I wasn't a superhero, but I'd lived as someone who never surrendered. Years passed, and Tuan and I grew older. My hair turned white. My hands trembled too much to hold a needle, but I still sat on the porch, watching flowers bloom. Tuan kept making buns, though slower, and we lived in our little house, now filled with Knock's laughter and the kids I brought home. One evening, I sat with Tuan, holding the old wedding ring, my voice weak. "Tuan, do you regret anything?" He smiled, grasping my hand. "Regret what, when I have you, Mai and Knock?" I leaned on him, tears falling, but my heart was at peace like never before. The day I fell ill, Mai and Knock stayed by my side. I lay in bed, looking at my daughter and granddaughter, seeing my life like a long thread, tangled at times, broken at others, but in the end, I'd sewn a beautiful garment. Mai held my hand, crying, "Mom, you have to get better. I still need you." I smiled, stroking her hair. "I'm well in my heart, live well, and I'll be happy." Tuan sat beside me, eyes red, saying nothing, just holding my hand tightly. When I closed my eyes, I wasn't afraid. I saw myself on a green field, Mai running to hug me, Knock skipping beside us, and Tuan waiting, his smile as gentle as ever. I whispered, "Thank you, Lon, for not giving up. Thank you, life, for giving me everything." And I knew I'd lived a life not straight, not perfect, but full, through love, resilience, and the people I cherished most. The day Mom left, I stood by her bed, holding her hand until it grew cold. I didn't cry out, not because I wasn't in pain, but because I knew she didn't want me to break. She lay there, eyes closed, a faint smile on her lips, like the day she held me under the overpass, whispering, "I'll give you a warm place to sleep." I stroked her hair, tears falling drop by drop onto the silver ring she wore, the ring she gave me on my wedding day. Now, I placed back on her hand, a promise I'd live well, as she always wished. Uncle Tuan sat beside her, silent like an old tree in the wind. He said nothing, just held her hand tightly, eyes red but tearless.